General George Custer. George Custer was born on December 5th, 1839, in Ohio. He began his career as a young officer and fought in the American Civil War. He gained fame throughout his apparent ability to avoid injury when fighting. He was known as the Boy General because of his young age and the bravery. He was a crucial counterforce to the Civil War. His cavalry took down the opposing forces of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee. After the Civil War, he was still a vital part of the army as he continued to do battle against the Native Americans. In 1876, the United States ordered an attack on the Lokotoa, a native reserve. He divided his men into 3 groups that would attack from different positions, but thousands of natives were waiting for the attack. Custer and his men were surrounded and killed. Villains: Billy the Kid. William Henry McCartney Jr. was born in 1859 in New York City. In his early life, he was a petty thief, since his father left him and his mother died early in his life. McCartney had a slim figure, sandy blonde hair, blue eyes, and wore a sombrero. He moved to Lincoln County and joined a gang of gunfighters. Once he barely escaped with his life and then became a fugitive and an outlaw. He was arrested in 1880 and was sentenced to death. Before he was killed, he assassinated 2 guards and then escaped in 1881. He was hunted down and killed by a sheriff in New Mexico. Legend has it that he killed 21 men in his 21-year life. Jesse James. Jesse Woodson James was born on September 5, 1847, in Missouri. The James brothers served in the Confederate Army before they started their life of crime and train robberies. They rebelled against the post-war legislation and made their own set of laws. The James Gang were the most feared outlaws in American history. They were responsible for more than 29 bank and train robberies, also the murders of countless people who were in their way. They stole an estimated $200,000 US. In 1874, Jesse married the love of his life, his first cousin Zerelda. They had 2 children, and Jesse was a good family man. There was a large reward for the brothers, and so a member of the gang, Bob Ford, killed Jesse by a shot to the head in 1882.
Since the dawn of the Western era, the understanding of life in the West through literature and film has defined our perception of the people, places, and events of that time through archetypes, recurring themes in the Western. These archetypes were not created entirely by those in the West. The typical Western, according to citizens in the eastern United States, was also defined by their understanding of the histories of states like Texas, California, Utah, and Oregon. Some archetypes plague the Western as exaggerated cliches, such as riding off into the sunset or Mexicans with very poor English.
The mountain police.
If you're the police, where are your badges?
Badges? We ain't got no badges. We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badge.
While others define the Western at its heart, such as the showdown or cowboy. At its core, the Western is a fight between both people perceived as bad and others thought of as good. Western character archetypes range from shining examples of heroes in the West to the lowest forms of villainy. Many of them consist of real jobs that existed in the West. The defining character in any Western is the cowboy, and while they usually traveled in small groups, the lone cowboy is a prevalent theme. The cowboy is tough, quick-witted, and stands for justice. For contrast, he sometimes has a less courageous sidekick who is dim, present for no more than comic relief. Sometimes these cowboys will travel in pairs or small groups and are either great rivals or the best of friends. Very rarely are there female cowboys. This is seen mainly in more modern media. Cowboys seldom have their origins and past explained. They are lone nomads carrying their possessions, their clothes, a wide-brimmed hat, and their gun on a horse. The other notable archetype that stands with the forces of good in the West is the lawman, either the sheriff or the ranger. He is in charge of keeping peace in the town and ensuring the people's safety. He is usually a larger man who has been sheriff for a while. He likes to work alone, though there isn't much work to be done as most towns are quite small, and of course, he wears that sheriff's star badge on the left breast of his shirt. He does sometimes have a partner, a deputy who usually fulfills the same role as the cowboy's sidekick. The sheriff is a wise man, everyone in town likes him, and he can be found at his station or in a saloon. The ranger is also a keeper of the law, but he is rooted to one territory rather than one town, usually a state. LaBeef in the Coen brothers film True Grit is a Texas ranger. One common archetype is the Lone Ranger. What it represents is the sense of lawlessness that existed in the West. How, against all the outlaws and bandits, only one man with his gun was in charge of stopping lawbreakers. Most westerns have either the cowboy or the sheriff as the main character, heroes that all aspire to be. Another common archetype is the Indian chief, who is an ally or enemy depending on the story. He can be either a warlike figure or one who smokes the peace pipe with his friend the white man. He is also a large man, red-skinned, and has full control of his fellow Indians. The cliched lack of proper communication is satirized by Mel Brooks in Blazing Saddles.
Schwarzes. Na, seid nicht Mischugge. Los im Game! Kappa walk. It's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wie gesehen. Take off.
The chief is the result of the perception of the Western settlers. This is especially seen when he wears animal skin clothing, the large, feathered headdress, and other strange customs. The Indian chief represents the understanding of the natives at the time, and also a person of power and order, being the leader of the tribe. The evil character in the Western is the outlaw, the lowest form of being in the West. He is quick-witted, mean to everyone, and good with guns, but uses his abilities to insult and harm others. He more than likely wears black, and like the cowboy, sometimes has a mask. Oftentimes he has a sidekick, serving the same role as other sidekicks in westerns. What he represents is the lawbreakers in the West, those whom you least want to be, the common enemy to which little pity can be given. There is a second form of outlaw, the bandito. Different from an ordinary bandit, the bandito is Mexican. He has darker skin and speaks in heavily accented English. He is an outlaw as well, but simply based on a stereotype. He represents the same things as the outlaw, as well as the idea that evil was not endemic to the white man. Other archetypes exist in the genre, though they usually play supporting roles. These include the undertaker, the lawyer, the barman, the judge, the hotel owner, and others typically found in medium-sized western towns. These usually have specific character traits, but are there solely to assist the cowboys or be threatened by the outlaws. Two characters often used in westerns are black people and women. Black people are the slaves in Western literature. They are the maids, the butlers, the cotton pickers, the ones you can hit without remorse, the ones who don't speak good English. And this is seen to quite an extent in the film Gone with the Wind.
Just hold on and suck in.
Mommy, here's Miss Scarlett's victuals.
You can take that all back to the kitchen. I won't need to buy it.
Oh, yes, you is. You's going to eat every mouthful of this.
I'm not.
Women await their husbands at home. They are sometimes rich, other times poor. And if they are in business, it's likely they're prostitutes. Modern ideals of this have also spun off the cowgirl. Characters are not the only archetypes in Western literature. Many events commonly take place in these stories. They can be divided into two categories, fights and crime. Most other happenings are in between these main plot devices. Fights include the quick draw showdown, the most classic event in Western literature. It represents the wills of one man against those of another, with only one survivor. Usually preceded by a card game or attempt to talk to another man's woman, the bar fight is another event commonly seen in the Western. It, like the showdown, represents the lack of law enforcement in the West. Disputes and conflicts were settled by men and sometimes ended in either bloody noses or death. Finally, the shootout is a battle between an army or police force and a gang of outlaws. It represents the chaos when it came to law enforcement in the West. Crimes are the other common element in Westerns. They range from robberies of banks or trains to the kidnapping of beautiful women.